Welcome to the second session of our Completing Your Practice Comeback series. Today's session is on adapting to new patient expectations. As things have changed throughout the pandemic, the patient preferences have changed as well, both with how they like to receive care and how they like to be communicated with. And so we're going to be diving into that a little bit more today. Want to introduce myself. I'm Alan Miller, the Integrated Marketing Manager here at Solution Reach, and I'm joined today by Jacqueline Hurley, our Business Development Manager, and Megan Funk, one of our success coaches here at Solution Reach. We'll do a little bit more of introductions with them here in a second, but first I want to jump into some housekeeping notes. A couple of things to know. If you have questions regarding any of the topics discussed today, go ahead and type them into the question box in the control panel, and we'll try and answer all of your questions at the end when we go through a Q&A session after the presentation. Also, if you're having technical difficulties, you can ask for help in that same box, and we will have a member of our team respond directly. One common issue is issues with sound. Every once in a while, people's computer sound, if they don't have headphones or speakers, isn't really working out for them. And so you're always able to call in, and we'll put some info in the chat here shortly with the dial-in information. If you find yourself frantically trying to take notes, just know that we're recording the presentation and we'll send it to you following the webinar along with the slides, and you can share any of that information with your team. If you are a Solution Reach client and you have any support questions, you can visit community.solutionreach.com. There's hundreds of helpful articles, videos, how-tos on there. So make good use of that. You can also click on the My Support link to have different options to contact our support team. And you can also email customers@solutionreach.com. And now I will, one last thing is please do connect with us on social media. We're always sharing great content similar to what we've got going on here. We actually just published a guide on similar topics that we'll share with everyone after the webinar series as well. But when it comes to practice or patient relationship management and practice management topics, anything like that, we're always trying to share helpful information. So connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn for that. Now I'll introduce today's presenters. Megan Funk is a success coach, like I mentioned. She works with offices to train and help them succeed with their digital communication tools, offers a unique perspective. She was once a practice manager for just short of a decade, and she brings insights on best practices for the office and how things are typically run. She also understands the stress of a day-to-day in the office and wants to help alleviate that stress as much as possible for the offices that she works with and for all of you. So we're really glad to have Megan here today. Also, Jacqueline Hurley is our business development manager. She spent 10 plus years advocating and offering the best experience for Solution Reach customers, has managed and consulted individual and mid-market healthcare clients from implementation, utilization, and best practices of internal marketing, reducing no-shows, and driving revenue. And she currently loves working with key opinion leaders, influencers, and thought leaders in the dental and medical field. So with that, I will turn the slides over to Megan and Jacqueline and let them say hi and get started.
Hello, everyone. Excited to be here with you.
Hi, everybody. This is Jacqueline, and I'm excited to take the screen. Let's see. Yep, here we go. So can everyone see my agenda screen now? Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes. I think we're set up. So
yes, we can.
Thank you, guys. So we're going to start we're just so excited to be here today, and it's such a treat to work with Megan for this webinar. She really has brought some amazing information to the table for this webinar, where she has worked in a practice environment, been an office manager. So pay close attention to the things she has to say today. We're going to start with going over our agenda. The series overview. We're just going to go a little bit over what Lori talked about last week in session 1, and then we're going to talk about how adoption of technology has shifted since COVID, which we all know it has shifted a little bit, which tools are most popular, as well as how to keep things personal in a tech-filled world. Everyone's that's the question, right, with all the technology that we have going on. So the series overview, we thank you for joining our Completing Your Comeback plan coming through COVID. Last week, Lori did a session where she graded your COVID comeback. She asked you many questions through polls and talked about and asked you lots of things about, if you're still taking temperatures, if you're still keeping patients 6 feet apart, all of those things. And honestly, I have to tell you, I was super impressed with the the answers that came through those polls. You guys have worked really hard to keep patients safe and team members safe, and you've managed your patients during a really crazy time. And this has been a hard time for the medical industry. So we're going to jump right into what we're talking about today. Our second session is focusing on adapting to new patient expectations coming through this pandemic. And next week, we are super excited to welcome a guest who will join us, Deborah Nash. I don't know if you know Deborah, but next week she will be presenting on rebooting revenue and on to victory. Deborah Nash is not only an international speaker, she is also a practice manager. She runs her team for her Dr. Ross Nash's practice in Charlotte, North Carolina. And she's an incredible consultant, and not only all of that, she is an incredible human being with such a kind heart. And so I'm excited for you to listen to her presentation next week, and she will be working with Hillary Melander, who is the Director of Marketing here at Solution Reach as well. So how did everyone do last week when grading your COVID performance? And I watched as the polls were filled out, and as I said earlier, I was very impressed with the level of healthcare that our patients have received. However, I was a little shocked when I saw this statistic. 60% of patients say they are willing to change practices after COVID-19, and meeting their expectations is critical. After I read that statistic, I came to the conclusion that I fall under that 60%. I hate to say it, but I honestly have been thinking about switching my dental provider for some time. And honestly, now that I haven't been in for a while, this might be a good time. The one thing I learned from last week is it's all about perception. Lori talked a lot about perception in keeping patients healthy, keeping our team members healthy. For example, she talked about offering a touchless sanitizer dispenser and instead of like a pump sanitizer dispenser. And even though they both do exactly the same thing, it's all about perception. Your patients are thinking, oh, this is touchless, they're doing everything. This is just one little thing they're doing in this practice to keep me safe. So I love that. So it's all about perception.
Exactly. The patient's perception is their reality. When I actually saw this statistic, I about jumped out of my chair. Everyone in an office setting needs to know this, that more than half of your patients are willing to walk out the door if you don't meet their expectations. We need to be aware of those expectations more than ever before.
Oh, I completely understand that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this today. So accelerated tech adoption post-COVID. Let's jump right into what has happened this past year. Here is an interesting statistic. Everything has moved forward. Businesses know that they need to create a more touchless environment. I think about movie theaters where they've kept people 6 feet apart and you can use your phone to actually scan your ticket. I thought about restaurants and how they are trying to keep people apart and trying to just do, drive-by pickups and things like that so that you can actually, not be exposed to the pandemic. But then you look at digital technology, and it's been accelerated by 3 to 5 years and up to 7 years in some industries, and with that pandemic. And this is true not only for businesses, but for consumers as well.
Yeah, I've been thinking of the restaurants and all their little digital menus and how much I love that they pop up on the phone, and you can read those later. But my opinion is that the adoption of technology has been steadily increasing over the past decade. COVID was just the initial push over the edge. Instead of patients feeling like the use of this technology is a luxury, it's now actually a necessity for them.
I completely agree with that, Megan. I think that's a great analogy right there. So we decided we want this to be a little bit interactive, so we're going to add a couple of polls here and there. And this is just a question for you, and we're going to ask Alan to launch this poll. And the question is, have you personally, this is you yourself, this isn't your practice, used technology in a way that you haven't in the past? Yes or no? That's kind of an easy question because you can think about your own life, think about the things that you've been doing as far as increasing the use of technology. And we'll talk a little bit about those, but I'm curious to see what the polls are.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see these results too, because I've used technology a lot more during the pandemic than I ever did before.
Oh, me too. Okay, so I think we're really close to getting those final numbers in. Let's take a look at that, Ellen. So, wow. So everyone has jumped into the technology phase, right? 78% said yes, 22% said no. And, you know, it makes me wonder if that 22% were already so techy that they used, you know, they used technology for everything already, or maybe they're not into technology at all and they're not interested in using technology. But I love that. I think that's a great statistic. So we're going to jump forward and talk a little bit about some of the things that have kind of affected us personally as a consumer as we saw these major changes as we came through the pandemic. So the first thing is purchase goods. DoorDash. I don't even know if I used DoorDash until COVID hit. What about you, Megan?
Yeah, it's embarrassing how much I used DoorDash during COVID.
Well, you know, it's interesting. What introduced me to DoorDash was the company we worked for. They typically do these birthday company lunches, and then all of a sudden, when we were all at home in our own virtual office, they started sending out these DoorDash gift cards once a month for our company lunch instead. And so that kind of got me going with it. And honestly, I have used it so much myself. It is kind of embarrassing. So let's jump over to Amazon. Amazon has created this world where we just want everything right now. We want everything fast. Technology helps you get there. And I was having a conversation with my daughter-in-law the other day, and she said, I really just wanted to order some pickleball rackets from Amazon so that Christopher, my son, and her could play. And she said, I'm so used to getting everything within a day or two. And she said they weren't coming for 5 days. And she thought that just seemed like forever in our Amazon world. I just thought, you know, it's crazy really what Amazon has done to each of us. And one thing I also was thinking about was I had a conversation with a gal who was, she was a student at Brigham Young University, and she was majoring in e-commerce. And she said, honestly, this new model has spoiled us. She says, do you ever wonder how Amazon is getting things to you so quickly? And I said, absolutely. I've been curious about that. And she said, if you're shopping on Amazon and you add something into your cart, then it is, and you leave it there for like a day, Amazon will automatically send that item to the fulfillment center closest to your home, whether you purchase it or not. So then when you do purchase it, it automatically is just fulfilled and comes to you so quickly. And I thought that is amazing. It's amazing how e-commerce has become such a big part of our world. So let's jump on to the next one, participate in schoolwork. How has that affected everybody?
So I think whether it be like homeschooling for kindergarten through 12th grade or attending college like completely virtually, I'm doing that currently. Many students have been educated online this past year. I I can't help but think of those poor moms that have all had to homeschool their kids recently. I just feel for them so much, the time that takes.
Oh, no kidding. I have a sister who lives in the state of Washington, and they've been pretty much shut down for the last year. And she has 4 boys ages 5 to 12, and she's been trying to help them with their studies online at home. And honestly, it has been the biggest nightmare for her. I have felt so bad for her because those rambunctious boys, they do not want to sit down at their computer. So let's talk about entertaining ourselves. Who's kind of upped, the technology in their life with entertaining ourselves? How much time have we spent? I know I've spent a lot more time on my phone being entertained. I love Pinterest. People love social media. There's so many games and apps you can download anymore. It just seems like there's a lot of entertaining ourselves going on with technology.
Everything's really at our fingertips. So we're constantly wanting to be entertained by the digital world. I mean, during the pandemic, I went as far as to attend a virtual concert.
Ooh, I love that. That's such a great idea. There was a lot of that going on, and it's so fun to be able to have that opportunity, right? What about communicating with friends and family?
Part of that entertainment, like we talked about, was the social media and communicating with our friends and family digitally. I think a lot of us have had to adapt to new ways of seeing, communicating with friends and family since COVID.
Yeah, I agree. I'm the oldest of 9 children, and it's not like we get together very often. We're lucky if we can get together once a year or maybe every couple of years. But when COVID hit, we kind of started doing this family Zoom time, like for holidays. I think the first time was like Mother's Day a year ago. We kind of thought, let's just do this for mom. It would be really meaningful to her. And so then we kind of started doing it on some Sundays. And honestly, I never even thought that was a thing before COVID, but it really has been kind of one of those, one of those blessings that came out of COVID, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's funny how we never thought of these things, right? We've had the same experience in our family where we're thinking a little bit more outside of the box. So COVID's really opened up those avenues for us to be creative when communicating digitally.
I agree. And then the last thing we kind of wanted to talk about was interacting with businesses has changed a little bit, and how we receive those healthcare services. And I think that's a big part of what we're going to talk about today.
I agree. So, I mean, every business practically has a chat feature, so you don't have to call in to get help anymore. I mean, I just used this to schedule a treadmill repair, and it was awesome. I could do that while working. So, again, we're going to talk about that huge shift in the healthcare services for the rest of the time today.
Perfect. So we're not going to ask this question again because we had such high numbers. So we're just going to jump right on. And in for businesses, we saw major changes in the way that they conduct work remotely, interact with customers, more digital and remote, attract new customers, as well as additional digital processes. So the company we work for experienced a huge change in the way we work. It only took less like a week to really send everyone home and get them set up in their virtual office. There was actually a statistic, I remember Lori telling me that before the pandemic hit, they had asked businesses how long they thought it would take to set up their company to be virtual. And most of them said 1 to 2 years. And I was so impressed with our company because it literally only took like 1 to 2 weeks to get all 400 employees working from home in the comfort of their own virtual office. And honestly, it's kind of been an interesting transition because in the beginning, I remember feeling like, oh man, I just can never get away from work. I feel like I'm always, on call with our communication system. And it was hard because we were all at home, right? We'd all been kind of ordered to just stay in our homes. But then once you kind of get into the groove, I really liked it. I felt like we had stronger communication. We could communicate instantaneously with whoever we needed to chat with in the company instead of thinking, oh, I need to run down to Bob's office and ask him this question. You could just do it right from the convenience of your home. So I love that. The other thing that I thought a lot about is your patients are no different. They are probably used to being at home, and you might have a hard time getting them in for their exams. Studies show that 30% of working professionals would quit if they had to return to the office after the pandemic. And I thought, that's interesting. Everyone has gotten so used to being at home. And healthcare is one of those services where you typically kind of have to show up in person. So you, as healthcare professionals, have the opportunity to make it really special for them. Like if you're distancing your families or whatever from coming into the practice, you can really spend a little more one-on-one time with those individuals while you've got them right there in the practice.
This can also present an obstacle too, right? It could result in your patients being maybe hypercritical of your office because they don't leave the comfort of their home often. So we want to watch for those opportunities to ask for their expectations. The other thing I thought of too was this webinar is a great example of us connecting digitally. It's not been long since we would have all had to take the day off the office, lose production to receive our CE credits that we need yearly. So how great is it that we can now only block off an hour of our day to receive those credits?
I love that. And just like this webinar, there's a lot of free CE webinars going on out there that are options. And what a great opportunity for our healthcare professionals to be able to partake of that.
I agree.
So what does this mean for healthcare? Studies show that the most significant and stickiest changes came in the financial, pharmaceutical, and yes, the healthcare industry. So one key factor I thought about when running a practice is really knowing what your patient demographics are, and then finding out what they are looking for in a practice. You can then easily adapt your practice to meet their needs. But if you aren't sure what your patients want, then you're going to have to find a way to know what their expectations are. And there are several ways you can do this. You can ask them one by one, which is kind of a little bit more time consuming, or you can send patients a survey asking them if there are any changes they would like to have happen in the practice. And it's important to back up your decisions with data. It's, you might think, oh, we have an older demographic, we're probably not techie, we don't really need to incorporate technology into our practice. So it's really a good idea to simply ask them, pay attention to the data, and then don't forget to implement those suggestions. Changing patient needs and patient preferences are likely to remain after the crisis. So it's not even just going to be a one-time survey. You're going to maybe 6 months down the road or a few months down the road, continue to ask your patients exactly what their expectations are in the practice.
As I mentioned before, so these services are no longer those luxuries, right, to these patients. They're now these necessities, and they're not going to go away. Patients are not going to allow you to remove the conveniences that once they've already used them. So removing these services after the pandemic will only increase the amount of patients willing to leave and find those options elsewhere. And we do not want to add to that 60% statistic that, to be honest, is already staggeringly high.
I know, and I kind of think I might be there, Megan, in that statistic. I don't know. It's kind of crazy.
I think we've all been there once or twice, but
it's true. But I love the relationship with providers, so it makes it a hard decision, right? So has your practice, this is a poll, we're going to take another poll here, Alan, we're going to use you for this. Has your practice adopted new technology since the pandemic hit? This is a great question to ask because we know we have all adopted new technology since within our personal lives, but what about your practice?
I'm very interested in this poll here.
Yeah, this will be a good one. I'm liking these numbers, people. Good job. Okay, Alan, you ready to show those numbers? I love this. This says a lot about our healthcare industry, Megan.
Yeah, it's great.
Has adopted new technology. And this is where that technology has been thrown into the future 3 to 5 years and sometimes 7 years, right? It's become huge as part of the healthcare industry.
I'm so happy to see that 70%. It really means that our offices are taking the initiative to change and listen to their patients.
I agree too. I think that's really great. So we're going to talk a little bit about these changes. Patient expectations have been changing really for years. So 75% of patients shopped around even before the pandemic. You think about what it meant to shop around back in the day, right? Patients were looking at things like your website, Google reviews. They were looking at if they could digitally communicate with the practice. We currently have so many more sources shopping around than we ever did before, where before it was like completely by word of mouth. And even though it's kind of still word of mouth, it's just kind of on a bigger level by taking it out on the World Wide Web with all of the reviews and the Facebook and all of the things that's going on to kind of get the word out about good providers that are out there. It seems like today patients not only want mobile friendly websites, but they use their smartphone for everything, and they're looking for more and more information on their phones. So that's one of the best ways really to communicate with them. In 2019, 40% said they would change providers due to a poor digital experience. And we know that that number has gone up since COVID. We know it's now 60%. And we also know that the highest expectations come from Gen Z and millennials.
Well, most Gen Z and millennials grew up with the technology. They honestly know nothing different. So I think they're almost going to require you to use it. That being said, just because they have the highest expectations doesn't mean that your other demographics have low ones. So keep in mind this statistic is rising across the board throughout all the different demographics.
Well, I agree. Sometimes we think if we have older patients in our practice, they really aren't that techie. But I have to tell you, I get so many texts from my dad every single week. It's crazy. And he is constantly sending me links from Facebook. He's kind of a Facebooker guy. And the one thing that my mom is really good at is talk texting. She's learned how to talk text. So it's really fun to text her as well.
I would agree. My mom's the same way. I think this older generation really wants to communicate with their family, and so they're learning to adapt. Something else here to note, it's important for you to make sure that you have the correct information and preferences on file. So a large part of this digital communication is making sure that your messaging is going to the correct contact. So ask for the updated information and communication preferences at every check-in. It's very important we're gathering that correct information. I recently had a friend who was given 2 referrals for a procedure. He texted the office with a higher online presence first. After a few days of waiting with no response, he contacted the second referral. By the time the first office responded 2.5 weeks later, kills me, the procedure had been scheduled and completed, and that office lost a patient. Digital communication allows us to respond quicker than ever, and we need to be using it.
Wow, that's a crazy story, Megan. I hope your friend's okay. I'm guessing he is, since he got the procedure done quickly.
Doing great.
Oh, good. So technology is a big part of those expectations. 60% of patients, and it's 73% of millennials, say that their digital experience is becoming even more important than their in-person experience. So this is kind of a huge shift, I feel like, because back in the day, people really just wanted to spend time with their provider. And honestly, I think nowadays with our millennials and our Gen Xers, they're kind of Gen Zers growing up, they are so digital. Just like you said, they were kind of born with a mouse in their hand. I actually have a daughter, a cute daughter. She's graduated from college. She had her first job. She got her first insurance, and she needed to find a dermatologist. So she asked me, Mom, how do I know which dermatologist is on my insurance? So I explained to her how preferred providers work, and I explained she probably might need to go to her insurance and could figure out a list of who is on it. Well, being the millennial she is, she went straight to Google. She did a search for dermatologists around me, and then she found one that she thought looked really awesome. It had great reviews. She looked at the website, looked at everything she could to find information out about this person and then about this doctor. And then she saw that he had an online scheduler right there on his Google business page. So she clicked on it, started filling out her information, and just thought, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to see if he can get me in. And of course, as part of that online scheduler, she was able to plug in what her insurance was, and it did confirm to her that he took that insurance. So that was perfect. She chose a day and a time, submitted it, and pretty soon they confirmed that she had scheduled the appointment. Then they sent her a confirmation text so that she could actually respond that she was going to show up for the appointment. And then like just a day or two before the appointment, she actually got her digital health history forms on her phone So she filled out all the information. And I didn't even know this whole story until after she had actually gone to the dermatologist. But when she was explaining everything to me, I thought, this is amazing, Courtney. And she said, I know. Do you know what the absolute best part is? And I said, what is the best part? And she said that I didn't have to even talk to anyone before showing up for the appointment. So I thought, okay, you are definitely a true millennial, and that's awesome. I love it. That's great. And honestly, I'm not a millennial, and I would have loved to have that same experience. So I kind of feel like this experience is something that is across the board when you're looking at patient expectations. There actually was a survey offered by Dr. Bicuspid, and the respondents ranked text, then email, then phone, then face-to-face communication by their order of preference when they are communicating with their care practitioner. So I thought that went right along with, technology is a big part, has become such a part of the expectations.
Yeah, it sounds like your daughter had the ideal digital experience, right? She didn't have to talk to anybody.
Right?
So honestly, I feel like this all boils down to convenience. We are all busy across the board. This is something that I saw in an office, but honestly, frankly, in my own life, it's far easier for us to respond to a text during the workday than it is to answer a call or to call someone back. And then by the time I'm off work, most offices are closed, leaving that window for communication back pretty small. So I'm 100% part of this statistic in wanting that digital experience. There are some reports showing that their response rate for text is 209% higher than phone calls, with a 90-second average time for response. Think about how long it takes you guys to play phone tag with some patients. We did this all the time, where you call and you get their voicemail, and then you call the next day and you get their voicemail, and it takes a week to get a hold of somebody. It's way too long to be playing phone tag when we have the ability of digital technology.
Good point, Megan. I think that's a great example. So we're going to jump on to another poll, and this just gives you an idea of maybe what do you think your patients expect now from from you as a healthcare provider. And no matter what type of practice you have, I think technology comes into play, and I really feel like patients do have these expectations. So let's go ahead and launch that, Alan, and we'll kind of see. Looks like, yeah. And there you can select more than one answer on this as well if you'd like.
Got a lot of really great digital options here in this poll.
All right, I think we're about there. I think we've got some good numbers here. So absolutely. So two-way texting, almost half, half of you feel like that is probably a high expectation for patients. Digital health history forms, almost identical. I kind of agree with that. Digital ways to pay, that's a little bit lower. It's kind of a newer option, isn't it, to pay digitally? So that's a little bit lower. Let's jump, and even the online scheduler is lower a little bit, which is great, but then all of the above is 60%. And honestly, I kind of think, I look at all of these, and I think it's probably a personal preference. Wouldn't you agree, Megan, on a lot of these?
Yeah, I think this is definitely a personal preference of your demographic of patients, but I mean, the statistics we're seeing across the board would lead us to think all of the above. The tech world is really taking off, like we know, 3 to 5 years. And so we need to be staying current with what our patients are wanting.
I agree. We're going to talk about some of these things, and I just saw someone, who mentioned, it's sad that it's kind of taking away the personal experience, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about that too as well today. So let's talk about digital communication, that two-way text option. 2 out of 3 patients prefer two-way text messaging over all other forms of communication with their provider. And I have to tell you, I'm kind of a part of that group. The last time I was on my way to the dentist, I was running 5 minutes late, and I thought, I will just send them a quick text to let them know I'm on my way. So I sent the text, and then all of a sudden it bounced back to me. And they had texted me and I had responded, so I just assumed I could initiate a text. But when it bounced back to me, I came to the realization that I couldn't initiate a text with them. So I knew it wasn't an option, and I knew I couldn't do that. And it was a little frustrating to me, I will tell you that. I spoke to a practice manager the other day who said that they are way too busy to implement texting into their practice. And I thought, wow, honestly, I thought, do you realize how much time your team really is killing by trying to call patients? Most of the time you either get no answer or you get a voicemail. And a crazy statistic is that 19% of people never even check their voicemail, ever, which I think that's an interesting statistic as well. So if someone does answer the phone, it seriously does take 2 to 4 minutes to conduct a phone conversation, which is a huge time, a time constraint. And then it only takes 4 seconds to send a text message straight from your desktop, not using a mobile device. And if you have a patient standing right in front of you and you're trying to answer the phone and multitask and do all of these things, it's so much easier when you can send a text message. This doesn't seem like a big deal until you know the average number of phone calls that come into an average front office. That number is 50 per day. And so that's incoming calls. That's not even outgoing calls when you're trying to get a hold of patients. With a text, you can quickly give the patient the information they need, and you can continue on with your other patients. You can take care of other office tasks until you receive a response. And this can include multi-patient conversations too, if you need to send out a blast to several patients at the same time. I never thought I would say this, but it's almost becoming an inconvenience to answer the phone when you are in the middle of other things. I tried to call my daughter the other day and she didn't pick up. And while I was leaving her a voicemail, I received a text from her and she said, "Why are you calling me? If you want to get a hold of me, just send me a text." Well, I'm her mom. I thought she would at least pick up. But then I started thinking about how busy she is. She works full time. She has 2 little kids. And I thought it just probably was not a convenient time for her to answer the phone at that moment.
Oh boy, I'm guilty of that one. I'm guilty of doing that to my sweet mother. She has learned that she needs to text me first, and then I'll pick up and call her when I have the time. Well, so when we received text messaging in our office, I wanted the team to start to utilize the new feature. So I actually put sticky notes on all of their phones saying, "Can you send a text for that?" I was immediately shocked at how little we picked up the phone to reach out to our patients. It truly freed up our day for other tasks in the office. So
Wow.
I'm a true believer in the text messaging in the office. Another thing to think about is patients with social anxieties can also fall into this category of not wanting to talk on the phone, preferring the text messaging. My sister, she's extremely shy, bless her heart. She still goes to the office that I managed for her routine visits. She calls me all the time, praising the office for the ability for them to schedule everything through text. She just appreciates it so much.
Oh, that's awesome. What a great story. I'm glad that you were able to implement text while you were a practice manager, because you've been with Solution Reach now for a little bit. And I just feel like that's awesome that you were able to do that. We're going to jump on to the next slide and talk a little bit about digital intake. When was the last time that you were handed a clipboard and asked to fill out a paper form when you went somewhere for a service? And as a practice, you might still be doing that. It's definitely something that has been around for a long time. And sometimes it's kind of scary to switch over to the digital services. I was super impressed recently when I went in for a physical with my general practitioner. I've always been handed a clipboard there. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I just knew that I needed to, kind of go through my paperwork when I arrived. Well, I was kind of pleasantly surprised the day before my appointment, they sent me a text to fill out everything digitally. It included like the COVID questions. It included so many things that I could just explain to them, and notes and anything that I wanted to let them know before coming into my exam. So I was super impressed with that. 53% of patients would switch medical providers if they could get access to touchless patient intake and registration tools. And I kind of believe that. It's interesting. It kind of matches up to the poll that we took that the expectation was at 49%, right? And then the study that we found said 53% would switch. So obviously 53%, more than half, would prefer for digital intake and registration tools. Last week, when we asked the question about digital intake tools, it showed that 62% did use digital intake forms. And there was one interesting practice that said, we've been doing this for 30 years. And I thought, wow, they were way ahead of the curve figuring out digital intake forms, but they've been doing that for 30 years. So if you are looking for something to set yourself apart from other practices, digital forms would be a really great place to start. Your patients will love you.
Yeah, digital forms I feel like is newer. So the office that had been doing it for 30 years, I was blown away. But I was impressed with the 62%. Again, it's newer to the scene, and so to have that high of a result, I was really impressed for the offices. I feel very confident that in the next few years, this will be the only way we're doing paperwork. So you guys are all ahead of the curve, and that's super exciting. I know for me personally, there is not much worse than filling out paperwork in the waiting room when you don't feel good. I mean, getting to the office in itself is a feat, right? You're getting yourself ready, presentable, and so being there to fill out paperwork can be daunting. So being able to fill out your paperwork from home makes this daunting task a lot more comfortable for your patients. Why would you not want them more comfortable? Also, patients want to spend the least amount of time in the office as possible, and you should feel that same way as their providers. The less time your patients spend in the waiting room filling out paperwork means that your schedule is running on time. And we all know that equals production if that schedule is running on time. Sending your paperwork out a few days ahead allows your patients time to complete those forms and then time for your team to input them. That results in making that check-in a breeze and your time more valuable.
I think that's so true. Great point, Megan. So we're going to just quickly jump to digital bill pay, and this was a little bit lower percentage in our poll. I have another quick little story. This is with my dentist, and some of these stories that I'm telling you with my dentist are some of the reasons I fall into that 60%, but so here we go. So you know how when you go to the dentist and they have you pay what they think you're going to owe, and then they process it like with your insurance plan, and then sometimes it's off by a few dollars. Well, recently this happened to me, and I kept getting this paper statement from my dentist for like $2. Month after month after month, it was $2. And I wasn't planning to go into the dentist for a while, and I thought, I'm not going to write my credit card on this piece of paper to send it back through the mail. And then I thought, I don't have time to call and pay this over the phone. It's like $2. I'll just have to wait. And I started thinking about it. If they would have just sent me a link, a text to pay link, I probably would have just taken care of it so easily and so quickly. It was kind of like a no-brainer. And so now, especially after the pandemic, this was before the pandemic even happened, but I think even now with, these practices are moving into a more contactless environment, and people don't even want to hand you their credit card hardly anymore when they're in the office. So I feel like digital payment is more important than ever before. So Megan, have you had experience with digital pay? Did you ever have experience with digital pay when you were in your office?
We did. We use digital pay, and I have kind of a different perspective on this. I know digital pay can be scary. I know switching any of your processes in the office can be scary, but most offices that are participating in digital pay are actually saving money. So a lot of offices don't know that. Typically, the merchant service fees associated with processing those digital payments cost less than the stamp and printing it takes to mail your invoices. On top of that, so already saving money, they're having their payments returned 10 times faster. So think about it. Everyone has their phone on them. It's honestly probably sitting close to you now. I know mine is. Statistics show that 95% of people read text messages within 15 minutes of receiving them, where your mail is easily tossed and forgotten. And to just add to Jacqueline's experience, that $2 invoice that office sent her just cost them more money than what they would get in return. Plus, it frustrated their patient.
It did, which is a little bit interesting. I don't mean to be frustrated. I kind of sound like a whiner, don't I? I'm sorry.
Not at all. Not at all.
Now, one statistic I saw too said that really 80% of patients say they would actually prefer to pay their bill digitally on either through text or online, but only 20% have the capability to do so. So that just kind of tells you some numbers right there. I spoke to an office manager the other day who loves text to pay, and she said, I go through my database and once a month, and anyone who is 60 to 90 days overdue are the ones she sends this text to pay link to. And she says she collects all of those fees so quickly, same day pretty much. So
I love that.
I thought that was great. Yeah, it was a great conversation to have. Okay, so we just want your feedback. I see there's so many comments in the notes, in the questions, and we're gonna have Ellen help us with this, but you can throw some more responses in the questions to the answer to this question. How do you keep a personal touch when using technology? We had a hard time turning this into a poll, so we thought if you want to just throw some responses in to the question box, we'd love to hear how some of you do keep a personal touch when using technology. While you're taking a moment to type out your ideas, we're going to jump to the next slide, and then we'll come back to this in a second while you're filling those out. Basically, personally, I feel technology can be personal, and I'll tell you why. The goal behind using digital services is so that communication between provider and the patient can become more efficient. You can do things like texting your patients one by one, or even send a group text. For example, if you have 5 patients who haven't confirmed their upcoming appointment, you can send them a group text that says, we've noticed you haven't had a chance to confirm your upcoming appointment. Can we mark you as confirmed to arrive at your scheduled time? And all they have to do is respond with the word yes, and then you know that they're actually going to show up. And this is so much quicker than calling each patient individually. And what about those automated birthday emails? You can even include a video from your team and just wishing each of your patients a happy birthday that would go out on their birthday, and think about that. It's automated. Or you could pull a group of patients to send personalized educational information around things that you've discussed with them previously. Technology can really make the difference in taking away some of those mundane, busy tasks. So when you have a patient standing in front of you, you can give them that undivided attention that they deserve. Let's talk a little bit about telehealth. It's kind of an interesting concept in some of the verticals. Telehealth exploded during the pandemic. It was kind of a way to stay in touch with your patients, and by this study, we know that telehealth has exploded in the pandemic, but it's here to stay. The majority of patients who experienced virtual care for the first time said they want to continue it post-pandemic. I have seen optometrists diagnose eye conditions using telehealth. I've seen dentists use telehealth as a consultation or a follow-up tool. Both of these industries can offer a higher level of patient care, and really in any medical care facility, I feel like it offers a higher level of patient care when you can incorporate video chat into their daily routine. I actually know a practice, and it's a dental practice down in Arizona, who uses video chat when discussing a treatment plan, even when the patient is still in the office. So the provider asks, would you mind if I went into the other room and took off my mask so that we can have a video chat conversation face to face? And I love that he does that. To me, that is a higher level of patient care.
Jacqueline, that's a great example of using technology in your favor. So masks are barriers between you and your patients. I used to ask my doctor all the time to remove his mask once the consult was done so that we could discuss the treatment with the patient. It just creates more genuine atmosphere. COVID has definitely made this more difficult. So that just means we need to get more creative. It's important for us to think of those appointments we could do remotely. So do you have any checkups or follow-ups you could meet with digitally? We want to save that chair time for true production. So most offices currently, I think, are scheduling some sort of ghost column for these types of office visits. So what could you move to a virtual appointment to provide more time in chair for that production? Your doctor can be handling the virtual call while an assistant's turning over a room or preparing for your next patient. We can also think outside the box on this. So think maybe tours of your office, meet and greets with your doctor for new patients, treatment plans, questions, follow-ups, consults. You can even do some educational events digitally. We used to do an implant seminar digitally. So think to yourself, can this be done virtually? And I think you'll be surprised at the amount of patients that are willing and excited to participate in these events. The other thing I wanted to talk about was that technology can be personal. So if FaceTiming or texting our family is personal, then why can't healthcare be? We want to enhance, not replace, that in-person experience with a digital one. So I've got a few tips. Things like tone of voice, smiling, and eye contact will help keep things friendly and genuine. Making sure that call wait times are as short as possible so they're not sitting on hold for a period of time. A great office atmosphere is important, so make sure it's quiet, well lit, your doctor is visible. And then adding a personal touch to your visit can be beneficial too. So in my office, we used to notate in the appointment a fun fact that we learned about that patient. We would then refer back to that note and bring it up at their next visit. So for example, Susie, how was your trip to Disneyland? Patients loved this, and they were always surprised that we remembered that they were going somewhere or doing something. This can have the same positive effect through technology. Lastly, we want to pay attention to those patient preferences. This is going to be different for everyone, and the patient does not want to be asked over and over again to participate in something that maybe they've already declined. So we want to be careful with those preferences. I'm excited to see some of these comments. Sorry, Jacqueline.
No, you're good. We do have a couple of comments. There's one from a couple of people have mentioned using emojis when they're sending text. There is also a concern about how to keep it professional. And, honestly, I think professionalism is good, but I think when you have a relationship with your patients, it's okay to send an emoji back and forth, right? Patricia Harris says sending out birthday greetings, holiday greetings, reminder, and a reminder text. So I just think that there's some really great ways to keep things personal. Honestly, I think patients still would love to spend a little time with you when they're in the practice. And so if you're using technology to help you with those mundane tasks, you can actually give them more one-on-one interaction when they're right there in front of you. I really feel like then you're not on the phone while they're sitting there.
100%. I agree with you on that. Gives them your undivided attention.
I agree too. We're pretty much out of time, so we're just going to wrap it up really quickly.
Once again, thanks so much for attending. If you do have to drop off, we really appreciate that you came here. If not, you can stick around as we answer a couple of the questions that came in. Do reach out if you're a SolutionReach client. Email us at customers@solutionreach.com, and non-customers, there's information there as well. But with that, let's jump back into some of the questions that we received. So,
Ellen, do you want to do the code up at the one
Yeah.
more time? Make sure
And then
as
we'll
well.
just leave the CE code up here
Okay.
in case anybody still needs to go do it or see it while we address some of the questions that came through the Q&A. So
Perfect.
one of them was from Courtney Napo. She said, "What are the best two-way texting services?"
So there's a lot of two-way texting services out there to choose from. And I will tell you that I've been super impressed with the two-way texting that Solution Reach has to offer. Yet we have a higher level of deliverability. And that just means that there's a lot of cell phone companies out there that sometimes they want to block the texting that goes back and forth. And we have taken great strides to make sure that our texts get out to our patients and that patients can initiate a text back and forth. You can send emojis, you can do a multi-recipient text, you can create, maybe you get the same question all the time, like what is your, what is the address, or things like that. You can actually fill out kind of a default message so that you can just click on it and send it quickly. There's a lot of two-way texting services, but I would definitely check out the one at Solution Reach.
Just to add to that, it's extremely user friendly. So we went through multiple different service providers in the office I worked at, and we landed on Solution Reach, and we're extremely happy with the service it provided.
That's great. Not to mention they were the first that actually sent a text in healthcare, in the healthcare industry. So that's huge.
There is another question related to text, and I think that we covered some of it, but she did mention, this is from Sherry, and in her question, you can chat us back in, Sherry, if you have something else that needs to be answered beyond what Jacqueline and Megan just covered. But she did say, kind of how can we deal with unwanted calls from the team or unwanted texts, as far as like using your cell phone. So I do know that with our conversations with Solution Reach's text tool, there's also an app that you can download on your phone, and that your team can download on your phone, so that you're not having teammates having to give out their individual cell phone numbers, but that they can text the practice, and that people can use it on different computers or different mobile devices. And so that's helpful there.
That's a great point, Alan. I want to speak to that for just a second. So for years, I was the emergency line number. So I feel you guys, I was taking calls and taking texts, in the middle of date night with my husband and whatnot. And when we switched over to Solution Reach, they allow you to provision your office telephone number. So basically, let your office telephone number be the number that your patients text or know. And then throughout that app, you're able to manage those messages, but never give out that personal information. And I was extremely grateful for that.
Great point, Megan. I love that.
We did have another question from Sierra Perry. And if you guys have any information on this, feel free to chime in, but I did check with our team in the back end just to make sure that we had a great answer for this one. She said, regarding text, what form of encryption/security is necessary to stay in compliance with HIPAA? So I know that kind of what I've found is that we can't offer legal advice as to what is HIPAA compliant and what is not, but we do offer a HIPAA consent tool within Solution Reach's texting tool that allows and requires the patient to opt into texting about their PHI, but it is not encrypted. That is something that our team is looking into if we would like to add that in the future.
I'll add to that too. Man, I'm just going to keep adding. So the HIPAA tool within the text messaging allows you to send that consent essentially out to the patient, and it's a one-time action. So it's not every time those patients need to talk about their health that keeps coming up. You send it once, and then the system keeps track of that signed consent. So it really makes that transition to talking about that kind of sensitive topic seamless.